Welcome, I'm Dave,
I'm John.
and this is Teaching Like Ted Lasso. The following is the extended version of the assessment interview play-by-play we did in episode 2, Be Curious. It includes more conversation around the geometry task that we discussed in the episode and a whole new play-by-play around a measurement task I did with Vance.
Welcome to Teaching Today. We have a special situation today. Dave is here as a coach. He's here as a teacher. He's brought a couple clips to watch to the podcast, and we're very happy to have him here to give us some insight into assessment.
Thanks. It's good to be here.
All right, so Dave, what did you bring with you today for us to watch?
So this is some video that I use in our first math course for pre-service teachers who want to be elementary teachers, and it's part of an interview project that they do, and I like to do a model for them beforehand because it's really difficult for them to kind of shift their thinking about what it means to be a teacher.
I've watched these videos. Are you really teaching here?
Well, that's just it, right? So a lot of them come into the profession thinking about teaching as telling. And one of the things that we want them immediately, like I said, this is their first class, to start thinking about is teaching as listening. So gathering data first, being curious about kids' thinking. And so that's one of the main reasons why I share this video, and several videos actually, of me doing these interviews.
Yeah, so I love that, right? So both curiosity, of course, but then this kind of underlying message that teaching is not telling. When those things are used synonymously, it drives me a little bit crazy. All right, so tell us who this learner is.
So Vance is a first grader. He's my grandson, and he would tell you that he's going to be a paleontologist when he grows up.
Excellent.
Yes.
So do you have some good dinosaur discussions?
Yes, we really do. He's excited at some point to do a podcast about Dinosaur of the Day.
Hey, excellent.
Yes.
All right. If only he had a grandparent who produced a podcast.
Yeah, one at a time, John, one at a time.
All right. Do you have like a sequence of questions planned that you're going to ask him?
So this task comes from Clements and Sarama, and it's a tricky triangles task, and it asks the learner to identify, gives 10 shapes and asks the learner to identify which of those shapes are triangles and which of those shapes aren't. I added a question at the very beginning. I'm just curious about what his definition of what a triangle is. So we start out with that. So the focus really is trying to determine, I think it's like 2GA1, about what makes something, what is and isn't a triangle. So even though he's a first grader, we're looking at a second grade standard.
Okay. Common Core coding. That's the kind of thing you get from my co-host. All right. So let's watch a bit of the video.
Okay. So Vance, tell me, what's a triangle?
It's a shape with 3 sides.
Interesting. Can you look at this sheet of paper? And can you tell me which of those are triangles and which ones aren't triangles?
So were you planning on having him eating while you were teaching?
No, so this is one of the things, right? You take advantage of opportunities. So we'd been playing most of the day, and he was ready to take a break, and this was the time where he wanted to do the interview as well. So this did change one thing, right? I had originally expected that he would circle the ones that he thought was, and or X out the ones that weren't, and then we talk about it.
Okay,
but now
so
he's just pointing.
So when you're saying circling and Xing out, what is he looking at here?
He's looking at the sheet of paper with the 10 shapes. All of them have triangular-ish shapes to them. Is that fair to say?
All right. So he's going to be pointing these shapes saying they are or are not a triangle?
Yes.
But he already gave you the definition.
Right.
So why aren't you happy just with that?
So what we know about a lot of students is that they memorize mathematics, and they often memorize without a real conceptual understanding about what goes into that definition. And so I don't want to be just reliant on using that data point to understand where he's at. So I'm curious about where he's at, and I need to gather a little bit more.
So even though you have an answer you're pretty happy with, that doesn't really tell you what he's thinking.
Exactly. It doesn't tell me how he would apply it, right? So he said it's a shape with 3 sides. So what does that mean to him?
Right. So we might not think about that as ambiguous.
Right.
But
You never know.
right.
This is a triangle.
Okay.
What's he pointing to there?
So that's the first one. So it is a triangle.
Okay.
Okay.
This, I don't know.
Okay. Which is a triangle, but he'll explain a little bit later why he doesn't know.
Okay.
This is a triangle.
Okay. Which is a triangle.
This, I think, is a triangle.
Which is not a triangle.
Wait, this is a triangle.
Which is not a triangle.
And this is a triangle.
Which is not a
And
triangle.
you think the other ones aren't a triangle? So you said you didn't know about that one. Why do you think that one might not be a triangle?
It's kind of thin. I've never seen a triangle like that before.
Oh, interesting. So is that the same thing with this one right here?
Okay. Wait a second. So he's already told you why he's not sure about this triangle.
Mm-hmm.
And what's the connection you're trying to make with that question?
So it's really about, he used some language that comes straight out of Van Healy, right? That it looks, I've never seen a triangle that looks like this. And so I'm curious about how he's applying his conceptual understanding of what a triangle is, and is he applying it to other shapes? And so
Right.
this is also a triangle, but it's also a thin, skinny, obtuse scaling triangle, and it's not one that he typically would have seen as a first grader.
Okay. Because of lack of variety of
Right.
shapes that we show kids. So it's visual reasoning, which is reasoning,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it's not necessarily right or wrong. This is just how he's processing.
Yeah, so this is his conception, and I just want to know about what his conceptions are.
Okay.
Yep.
Interesting. So, and you said this is a triangle? What makes that a triangle?
Which one are you pointing at there?
So it's actually a quadrilateral, but it again looks triangular-ish because there's only a little piece of an angle cut off, and but it looks like the typical equilateral triangle that they see so many of when.
So either the fourth side is too small to count, or it's a broken triangle, or
Yeah, well, it's just too small to
Okay.
count. Yeah.
'Cause
And
it's
he
got
just
that shape.
motioned with his hand there that it had 3 sides
right. But the fourth one doesn't count as a side to him.
to him, right? Because conceptually it looks like a triangle.
Okay.
I don't know about this one or this one.
Which one and which one?
This one and this one.
What are the two he's pointing at there?
So the top one is an open shape. It's not closed, but again has a triangle shape. And then the other is a kite that again looks like a triangle, but has a 4th side.
Gotcha.
Why might that be? Why might that not be a triangle?
Kind of like wide slanted.
The triangle that was open, what was the reason he gave? For
Again, it was based on looks, right? He hadn't seen a triangle that looked like that.
But it wasn't even the open part. He
No,
said
no,
he refers
exactly.
to the slant.
Right. So it's not. So the connected sides is not part of the conception, at least not what he's demonstrating here.
I'll tell you, that really interests me because the bottom of the triangle isn't parallel to the edge of the paper. So, but he quickly identified the upside down triangle as a triangle,
Right.
which sometimes gives kids problems, right?
Right.
Okay. And now he's moving on to talk about the kite.
Right.
Okay.
Not be a-
Because it looks more like a rhombus to me.
Oh, interesting. Interesting.
Hold on. You're just going to let him say it looks like a rhombus?
Sure. It's not. As an assessment, this is not a chance or an opportunity to fix his thinking. It's an opportunity for me to understand his thinking. I didn't challenge him on any of his other ones. I'm just gathering some information here. And then later I can use that information to maybe give some examples of these are triangles or these aren't triangles. But at this point, I just want some information. I was certainly surprised that he called it a rhombus. But again, it's also really interesting that his rationale wasn't because a rhombus has four sides, or it wasn't because it has four sides, but that it looks like something else. And so again, that conception of triangles based on looks seems to be holding steady.
And it occurs to me that if you were in a classroom for the discussion at the end of this activity, you'd have some questions that you could ask particular learners.
Right.
That really might fuel a discussion.
Right. So we're just doing one student here. I could imagine doing the same activity with multiple students and seeing whether or not, and I would imagine, based on, again, the research that we know from Van Haley, that many of the first graders would have the exact same responses that Vance had. So,
Well, there are even some that he thought were triangles that, that other kids wouldn't even think about.
Right.
Just because of experience. Okay.
So how about number 10? Do you think number 10 is a triangle or
Okay,
not?
so what's up with number 10 that you're pointing to?
So number 10 is a triangle shape that we would expect him to say yes to if we're based on looks, but its sides are rounded.
Gotcha. So at this point, are you thinking he's going to say, yes, that's a triangle?
Yes,
Or
yes.
do you do a lot of predicting, like what you think kids are going to say to your question?
Predicting, anticipating, you want to be prepared, but you also want to be able to adjust. So I was prepared for him to say, yes, it was, but I was also at the very beginning when he said three sides, prepared that maybe he wouldn't, because that he might, if I were to ask him what a side was, he might say straight. So
Okay.
Good. And what did you say a triangle is? How did you describe a triangle?
A shape with three sides.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Okay. Now, you didn't ask him about every triangle.
no, I didn't. I felt like there had been enough consistency. I don't need to practice like false curiosity and ask about everyone, right?
Okay.
This interview, took less than 2 minutes, and one of the things I want to demonstrate to the pre-service teachers is that these can be done in a reasonable amount of time with a reasonable amount of materials. And so I don't want to belabor any of those points by going on and checking in with each one of those. I'd gotten enough information at this point that I felt I knew where Vance was in his understanding of triangles.
Okay. Now, the one thing I think people, just from my own experience with pre-service teachers, is they see this video and think, wow, that kid is good at sharing his thinking. There's something special about this kid.
Well, there is. He's my grandson.
Naturally.
What I try to encourage is them to give it a try. So all of them, I've taught this course now for 3 semesters, probably around 50 students a semester, so 150 students, and they've all done this, right? And they share their findings in a professional learning community at the end of the course, and they all find that they can do this. It helps if they do the interview with a student or a learner that they've already built rapport with.
Yeah.
They get a lot more information that way.
Well, like any aspect of teaching, right?
Exactly.
The relationship is the foundation.
Relationship is important.
All right. And you have a second clip. You brought a second clip.
Yep.
Same kid.
Yep.
Okay.
Same year, first grade, a little bit later in the year.
All right. And what are you going to be asking them about?
So this is an IM task, a second grade task, again, and it's asking them to draw a line of a certain length by just estimating that, then measuring that, and then finding the difference. So it's really about finding the difference between 2 lengths,
Okay.
the estimated and the actual. You'll see it didn't go like that.
Oh, okay.
I still tried to get at that same idea of finding the difference between 2 lengths.
Okay.
It's a measurement standard.
Are you saying kids don't always do what we expect them to?
I'm saying they never do what we expect them to.
All right. Here we go.
That wooden thing is?
It's a ruler
It's a ruler. What do you use rulers for?
to measure.
Like, can you give?
Okay. So at this point, even, he must have some experience.
Right, he's familiar. And again, it doesn't surprise me. He's worked with his dad in the workshop. And so,
Okay.
I could ask some more deeper questions about how do you know it's a ruler? I think it's important to, regardless of what you hear on this podcast, to stay focused on what you're trying to learn from your learners. And so, I didn't need to know how he learned it was a ruler. It was
Okay.
just helpful to know that he knew it was a ruler.
And yeah, kids bring so much to. That's one of the things I find fascinating about measurement. Here I'm going not being focused right after you said be focused, because this is something they bring non-classroom experiences to. All right.
Example, can you use that ruler to measure?
Okay, so from here all the way to here is 12 inches.
Okay,
So I'm gonna write that down.
okay.
So right here, he's not writing it down. He's actually trying to make a line that's 12 inches.
This is
on
like I can make it to like
Oop, here,
11.
what you're saying? So
he's not just writing down 12 inches. He's writing down. He tried to make a line 12 inches long on a piece of paper that's only 11 and a half inches long. And so I've now changed what I want to do, right, with him. So he's already created that first line. I'm just going to ask him to compare that to some other lengths.
Okay.
10 inches. So let's just work with that.
Okay, so, and you said you're gonna write 11 underneath it? Okay. Can you make one that is 5 inches long?
Any particular reason you went for 5 there?
Since we were gonna do some subtraction, I was looking at a near double, right? So thinking about 5, 6.
Gotcha. So not just comparison, you're maybe going to do some computation.
I'm just curious about that.
You're creating an opportunity,
Right.
whether he goes that direction or not.
yeah.
Okay. At this point, are you anticipating that he will be able to make a 5-inch line?
I anticipate he made an 11-inch line. I'm anticipating he would be able to make a 5-inch line. Yeah.
And not every kid can.
Not everyone
necessarily,
can,
Right. Okay.
It is interesting that he's doing it at the bottom of the ruler, not at the
So
top.
why don't you write
Where the
5
numbers are.
underneath
Yeah.
that?
Okay.
So,
So did you see? What did you see about like how he made the 5, just in terms of his ruler use?
So he started at the end.
So
and
he's not starting at 1.
he's not starting at 1, so he's starting at the end at 0, and he drew it till he could line it up with 5 under. But again, very interestingly, underneath.
Yeah. So do you think he's like counting the units, or is he using just the number 5? Do
I
you have
think
any
he's
ideas
just
about that?
using the number 5.
Okay.
Because if he was counting the units, that it would be slower.
Slower, okay.
And you'd see that. But in the video, you can see that it's very smooth.
That's true. Right. He just draws the line.
Right.
how much longer is the 11-inch one than the 5-inch one?
Okay. So that's the comparison question, and you're quite specific, not just is it longer or
Right.
something like that.
Thanks for the wedding.
Wait a second. There's a wabbit?
There's a 4-year-old who's in the background who originally I was going to also interview, but then decided that she was not interested.
Okay.
But she wanted to be still part of this. She's jumping on me. So this is trying to also model for the future teachers that as you're doing this, you might need to engage in some very intentional ignoring if you want to.
There are other things going on
There are
in the
other things
classroom.
going in the classroom, and again, it's helpful. She's playing, right? So she doesn't need a lot of attention at this point. And you'll hear she's actually also though attending to what's going on, which
Okay.
is really interesting.
All right. Wait, so can you
7.
describe
How
what
did you
you
get
saw
that?
him doing with the ruler there?
So, in order to find the difference between, again, the question was, what's the difference between 11 and 5? He starts at 5 and uses the ruler as a number line, and he's counting the jumps, but he counts all the way to 12.
Oh, okay. All right. So what number did he just tell you?
7.
7.
I counted.
Okay. So can you make one that's 7 inches long then? Yeah, use your ruler to make one that's...
Okay, why 7?
Well, because that's what he said.
Okay,
So I'm going with what he said.
all right.
So he answered a different question. He went back to sort of the original understanding that a ruler has 12 inches on it. And so I asked about 11 minus 5, and he did 12 minus 5.
Gotcha.
7 inches.
And drawing at the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to label that 7.
Okay, because he writes 7, but
It's backwards.
it's backwards. So are you tempted at all to correct his writing?
So tempted, yes, but he's going to see tons of sevens in his life. He's going to be fine. He's going to figure that out for himself. I can model making 7s for him, but I don't know that it's worth us spending any time trying to make that correction, potentially derailing him from his thought process, or even his conception of himself as a mathematician.
Right. Boy, yeah, if you step in and correct that at this point, who knows what he's going
Right.
to take from that.
Exactly.
Right.
So I'm good. I know what he means.
Mhm.
He knows what he means. We can move on from there.
And was he successful making a 7-inch line?
Yes. He's now making arrows so he doesn't lose which ones are which.
Oh, really nice kind of labeling as a process.
Okay, got it?
Okay. And now, how much longer is the 7-inch one than the 5-inch one?
It's 2.
How'd you get 2?
Because 5, 6, 7.
Okay. So can you make a 2?
Okay, so I'm not wondering what you were thinking then.
So he's counting on to solve this problem, right? It's also very clear that he's counting the jumps, not the numbers. So it was a little surprising to me that, I mean, that's actually a fairly difficult problem to do, but he used addition to solve it.
Yeah, there are a lot of nice computation thinking going on there,
Which one now?
and representation.
Yep.
This is going
And
to
again,
be
using
Why is this one going to be easy?
Because 1, 2.
so there you go. So you hear Aggie in the background
Let's label
also
that
trying to
2.
help out.
Now, Vance never answered you about why it was easy.
No.
Okay.
Thanks for
Yeah, my assumption, knowing the two of
So what-
them, my assumption knowing the two of them was that Aggie answered what he would have answered.
Okay, so
Yeah.
there's no need
Yeah.
for either Vance or you to kind
Right.
of revisit it. Okay.
the comfy landing.
So what's the longest
Piggy wants to
one?
be on
the
your
11-inch
own.
one.
And what's the shortest
Piggy
one?
wants
It's
to be
the
in your
2-inch
fridge.
one.
And what's the
You
difference
don't have
between...
Peggy in your fridge.
Sure, Aggie.
And
So what's the difference between the 2-inch one and the 11-inch one?
Piggy's a
And-
Tego bot, not a real Tego. That's the Tego toy.
Okay, so a lot going on there.
Right.
So, what did you see Vance doing on the ruler? You asked, what's the difference between the shortest and the longest,
Right.
the 2-inch and the 11-inch?
Right. So I wanted to go back to this idea of his originally using 12. And I wanted to see if he would stop at 11 or if he would keep going. And what he ends up doing is keep going again. It's like as he's doing it, he's
But he didn't give you an answer.
no, he did it, stopped at 11, and then jumped to 12. But then I think with Agnes there and all of the
Distraction?
chaos I was going to use, but the distraction's probably a better one. He's gone back to counting it.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
And you can see he jumps.
and 2 is 10 away from 12.
2 is 10 away from 12, so how far is 2 away from 11?
It's 9.
And How'd you get that?
And that was with no counting on the ruler.
No.
Okay.
And that's why I asked how you did it. So there's an example of where somebody, the students might say, well, you corrected his thinking. I didn't correct his thinking, right? I just asked him the next question,
Well,
a
'cause
follow-up question.
He doesn't answer how far is 2 away from 11 with 10.
Right,
He says,
right,
how far is 2 away from 12?
right. And
Did that like create an opportunity?
yeah,
Okay.
that felt so he explained. So this is the power of answering a different question, right? So he explained which question he was answering, and so I'm wondering if he can use that to answer the original question, the 11 minus 2.
Okay.
Because
Count it.
10 plus 1 is 11, and then 2, so it's 11.
That's fun.
Thank you.
All right. I'm not sure I followed him there.
I didn't either, but I felt like if you look at the time, this has gone on a little bit longer than the last one.
That's 3.5 minutes.
Yeah, and again, I'm trying to model that I don't have to get to the bottom of everything, right? And he's demonstrated to me that he knows how to use a ruler. He's demonstrated to me that he's got actually some sophisticated ways of finding differences between some numbers. He's mostly, it seems like, where he's coming up with problems, if you want to say, or issues, has more to do with his ability to kind of stay focused on what was the original question. And as we get farther along and start writing number sentences and things like that, again, I'm not worried about it. I'm more interested in like some of those conceptual understandings, and I feel pretty good about where he's at in terms of knowing what comes next.
Plus all that measurement understanding that he
Yeah.
has going on.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on. Is there any last message you want to give teachers about this idea of kind of quick? Would you call this formative?
Yeah.
Quick formative assessments?
Be curious and build rapport. I think those are it. So there's one more interview, and we can go out on that. It's the interview where I asked him our Ted Lasso question.
Vance, what's your favorite movie and why?
My favorite movie is Jurassic World Dominion because of all the adventure, and I like that all the characters from the original Jurassic Park, well, the remaining ones, and the ones from the Jurassic World are all filmed together, and some new characters. And I like the new dinosaurs.
All right. Well, Dave, thank you so much for bringing these. I love listening to learners' reasoning, and getting a chance to hear what was going on in your head while we were watching was a special treat. So thanks very much.
We appreciate Vance and his willingness to share his thinking with us for this episode. A special thanks to Joshua Davis for allowing us to use his music for this podcast.